It's been a tough couple of weeks for Prime Minister Theresa May, whether it was the Manchester attacks or the social policy U-turn that they struggled with as well. Can she wrestle the focus of the remaining campaign back to Brexit, where she tends to do better?
Well, that is indeed what she's trying to do right now, and she teed that up today when she was speaking on the campaign trail in the UK. Of course, Corbyn and Labour know that they themselves don't have a fully formulated policy on Brexit, so they're trying to get the Prime Minister on the back foot on domestic issues. Now, Theresa May is repeatedly saying that the message that she's the only leader who can deliver a strong Brexit, but the truth is that once those talks get underway, Theresa May can say what she likes, but it's very much going to be a two-way dialogue with the EU27 and whoever will be Prime Minister of the UK facing that EU27, and those negotiations are going to be tough.
Nina, I'm going to ask the really ignorant question, but of course when May announced early elections, the assumption was it was going to be a landslide, that her party would have a gigantic majority. So for the people that just sort of tuned it out there, and maybe that's myself included, I'm not going to say, and just assume that would be the whole thing, explain what's really changed the story to why people think this may not be the cakewalk that was expected. In your view, what's really changed the dynamic?
Well, I think this is quite a historic election. Of course, we're witnessing one of the biggest political events since the Second World War, that being the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. And throughout that campaign trail, throughout the Brexit referendum, there was never much of a discussion as to what Brexit would look like. And it was a very, very close referendum. I mean, 48% voted in. So I think what you're seeing in the United Kingdom, perhaps also similar on a certain level to what you're seeing in the US, is the dynamics of politics shifting. So you're seeing a very interesting dynamic now where the Conservatives are going for voters who have traditionally been Labour voters, and Labour going for liberal, metropolitan elite voters who have traditionally perhaps voted Conservative or Liberal Democrats. So you're seeing a complete shift in the political landscape. And where that's going to fall, we're actually only going to be able to see after the general election. But I think the conventional wisdom, even if the Tories don't have a landslide, that they'll still win the election, seems to be true. However, polls have been wrong in this country repeatedly in the last few years, so we might still be in for a surprise.
I'm going to pick it up right there because as you're speaking, Nina, we have banners that say May's UK election lead slips away. The polls are tightening. We know pollsters got the 2015 election badly wrong. They also didn't get Brexit right either. Do you think polls are more reliable now than they were 2 years ago?
Well, I certainly don't think so. I think that there has been a problem with polling in this country, and that certainly came true after, as you mentioned, the general election and in the referendum campaign. I don't know if the methodology that pollsters use has been effective, because things are obviously changing. Perhaps the traditional weighting which they apply to assess those polls are no longer relevant. But we'll see again whether or not this is a third time where they're wrong after the general election.
Nina, can I ask you what her declining majority, according to the polls, actually means for the outcome for the Brexit negotiations? Is it right that the bigger majority that she has here, the more likely it is that we avoid a hard Brexit scenario because she's more likely to be able to compromise?
I don't think so. I think that the bigger majority simply means that Theresa May would have more leeway in conducting those negotiations, at least domestically. However, when it actually comes to the hard Brexit, Theresa May's already said that she wants to leave the single market. That's already a hard Brexit, because the red lines for the Conservative Party are ending free movement of people and also ending the jurisdiction of the ECJ. Now, the interesting thing is that even if Labour were to be in a more powerful position than polls suggested they might be, it's still very tricky because Labour doesn't have its own policy on Brexit either. So I think that if it is a hung parliament or a situation where Labour has more seats than predicted, or that Theresa May thought would be the case when she called the election, it just means that domestically politics gets more difficult in already what is going to be a very difficult negotiation, even if you have a strong Prime Minister in this country, because of the different priorities of the EU27.
I know on this polling question, a lot comes down to will the youth vote turn out? And I think a lot of the assumptions that are baked into this really sort of hinge on that question. And of course, in the Brexit vote itself, there was a lot of claim afterwards that the reason that the UK voted for Brexit was because the young didn't vote in very high levels. Do you think there's any reason to think this vote will be different on that front?
Well, it's impossible to say. I mean, one of the theories is that a higher youth turnout in this election will favour Labour. But until we actually see the results and what actually happens, it's difficult to say. That is an assertion. But, you know, looking back at the Brexit referendum, for example, what's very clear now is that there was a split along educated and non-educated, those who lived in cities and those who lived in the countryside. But how this vote will split, we don't know yet, because we're entering into uncharted territory, really.